car crash cases, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts. The attorneys, with Josh Wright from the law firm of Hollis Wright and host David Lamb.
Good evening and welcome into the attorneys. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Got a really interesting conversation that we believe will matter to you, so be sure to stick around. A good half-hour conversation and discussion ahead. A couple of the ground rules of kind of how it works. You'll see at the bottom of the screen all throughout the program tonight ways you can join our conversation and get in touch with the folks at Hollis Wright. Also, a neat thing that the firm makes available during each and every show, they make attorneys available. It's a live, confidential, all-fair conversation. All you have to do is pick up the phone and give them a call if you have a question. The opportunity to speak with an actual attorney tonight during the show. So I advise you to take advantage of that opportunity. Leading our conversation, he's the managing partner of Hollis Wright. Josh Wright, good to see you, sir.
You too. Hope you had another good week.
I did. Thank you.
Everything going your way?
It is. How about you?
It's fabulous.
It's going to be a good show tonight, isn't it?
It's going to be a great show. You know, we don't always do shows related to kind of business formation and what rights a business owner has. Right. But we have a lot of people in the viewing audience that either have their own business or they're involved in businesses where the rights of a shareholder or a member or an operator of a business become relevant and pertinent, especially during certain types of disputes. Mm-hmm. We're going to be talking a little bit about that today. We're lucky today, as you well know, we bring the experts on, especially on things that we don't do at our law firm. We don't do any of this work, and so we bring experts on. Tom Baddley with Baddley, Mauro, and Yates is on tonight. And first of all, welcome, and happy to have you on the show.
Good to be here.
This is an issue that I'm not super educated about, but I know you are, and that's why we brought you on. You're our expert today. I hope you knew that.
Well, I don't know that I'm an expert, but I've done it a long time.
Good. Tell us, Tom, if you will, tell us a little bit about your firm and kind of how you got into this area of the law.
Just probably by accident. You know, the bulk of the Alabamians work for small businesses. We're covered up with that. And many years ago, I had a couple come to me with a mortgage, and I never read one. And I decided I'd read it. And it had a lot of language in there that was the benefit of the people paying the mortgage. And we successfully recovered a six-figure verdict against the bank in that case, so I went into that area of the law. And at that time, not a lot of law firms did that on the plaintiff side.
Tell us a little bit about your firm. Does your firm handle other things other than this type of business dispute, or are they primarily doing business dispute litigation?
Primarily we do business disputes. We're a three-lawyer firm, but we're set up to handle complex litigation. And we sue a lot of banks, mortgage companies, business dissolutions, things of that nature, non-personal injury, such as your firm does.
Yep. So ultimately, when a business owner has an issue or a dispute that arises, you recommend, like, should they try and handle, especially if it's going to be legal related issues and contractual related issues, do they try and handle that stuff on their own initially, or do you recommend you get a lawyer involved? How does that normally, what's that advice?
As I'm sure you know, so many people are adverse to lawyers. Yeah. We're really not that expensive. It's so easy to get an agreement on a piece of paper. But I would suspect the bulk of small businesses in Alabama are done on handshakes and probably involve family or extended family. Okay. That's great. That leads to a lawsuit.
Yeah. What's the most common thing you see in your area of the law with businesses and disputes they run into?
Usually they're family businesses where you've had a strong older family member run it, and they've been successful. But they've hired mama, they've hired the nieces and nephews and cousins. And that leads to your dispute. You start hiring mother as a salary hire, or you hire a favored uncle or a favored niece. I see that probably as one of the biggest areas of disputes occurring in small businesses.
Now, Tom, I know you probably can give some advice here. When you're setting a business up, how you set that business up can impact your own liability. It can impact how you litigate cases. I mean, that setting that up is a pretty critical component, is it not?
It is, and a lot of it's tax issues. You can be a corporation, you could be a limited liability company. There are different vehicles there that any lawyer can recommend the best for you. It's very flexible. I tell you, the biggest problem that we run into is a lot of people, their friends, their partners, their relatives, they want to be 50-50.
Right.
It never works.
Yeah.
If you have a 50-50 business relationship, you're going to have a dispute.
Yeah. If you do have a 50-50 relationship, let's assume you set something up, you didn't formalize it, but you got 50-50 owners. Can you come to a lawyer to get an operating agreement, for example, that tries to distinguish who gets to vote, who's got more voting right, those types of things? I mean, are there things you can do to fix that?
You can. You can fix it. The problem I've seen where people have gone to lawyers, and against the lawyer's advice, they have still gone into business 50-50. Well then, and we had one just recently, the business was deadlocked. Yeah. It could not function. Well, the only remedy was to dissolve the business, but they had a very valuable name and reputation. So it became a legal nightmare, an absolute nightmare. I would never recommend that 50-50.
Well, you know, this is good advice. I'm sure there are a lot of people sitting on that couch right now that realize they're in that position. But you know, as Tom mentioned, you can work with lawyers to try and get yourself out of that. And I really like one of the comments he made, which is so true, David, and that is that people think lawyers are expensive, especially on our side of the bar. They're really not all that expensive. We talk about on the personal injury side contingency fee arrangements. They've got creative ways that they can do it too to make sure that it's not overly expensive for a business.
Whenever you're advising folks that are starting a business, is incorporating always a good idea? Do you always advise?
Not necessarily incorporating. And let me say this, Josh, the bulk of our business is contingent fee.
Gotcha.
I do as much free advice as you do.
Okay.
Anytime people call, we're happy to give simple advice, but to answer your question, it all depends.
Okay.
Limited liability companies have a little bit more flexibility, and I don't want to get into all of that, but there are different options, all of which are relatively easy. It's really not that expensive.
Are there certain rules that require a company to register, for example, as an LLC versus a PC? I mean, I know there are general liability based, and you mentioned some of the tax issues, but you know, aren't there really ways that you can protect yourself as a business owner just by incorporating?
Yes.
Okay.
Corporations were done initially primarily to protect individual assets. That you would have to sue the company in order to recover. You couldn't go beyond the company. You couldn't breach the corporate shield or the corporate structure. That has now changed a lot with flexibility. I will say I think corporations probably are the least flexible vehicle that people can use. But here again, it's very simple that when people come to you, they can tell you what they want to do, and the lawyer can fashion a remedy for what you want to do. The key is the remedy when you have fights and disputes. Yeah. That's the key.
And one of the things that I have found, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong here, one of the things I've found is the lawyer may do a good job on the front end creating the organization, but if the people that are involved in the organization don't comply with the corporate formalities and the formalities necessary, they can get themselves into trouble.
Well, they can, and most people don't.
Yeah.
A corporate file, and we're not what I would call corporate attorneys. We normally represent minority business interests. But if you don't follow up with your corporate details, you can get in trouble, and there's nothing like a good accountant.
Yeah.
They can really do that for you.
Yeah. We run into circumstances where I'm in a case right now where we're trying to do what's called piercing the corporate veil, which is you've got a corporate structure where somebody's protected and they're insulated because of the corporate structure, but they didn't comply with the formalities that are necessary to maintain that. They didn't properly capitalize the entity. You know, they didn't have appropriate meetings. They didn't hold themselves out really as a corporation, and it was more a mom and pop trying to insulate themselves from a liability perspective. And so we're working to pierce the corporate veil because there's a level of insurance that's applicable if the corporate veil is pierced, and we think the evidence is clearly there. They didn't operate as a corporation even though they called themselves one. So we don't need to go into all of that, but what I can tell you is this. I know he sees that a lot. A lot of it depends on how you set your business up to start with, but then the operators of that business got to comply with what the law requires to get themselves insulated in a way. So when we come back, we'll kind of unwrap that a little bit more.
We'll do it. We'll pick up right there as we head to break. A couple of reminders. Here's how you can get in touch with the show and the firm. That information is going to be available right there all throughout the show. Would love to hear from you. Also, those attorneys from Hollis Wright standing by live, so take advantage of that opportunity to get some free legal advice during the show. Stay tuned. We are coming right back.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm. Thank you for watching The Attorneys. Now, we hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple. Provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free, so if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury-related topics, you can call, email, or text us. Or you can also follow us on Facebook or Twitter, or simply contact us by going to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us link. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us watching The Attorneys.
Welcome back in to The Attorneys, talking about business formation, making sure you get that business off on the right foot and on a good foundation. Would love to have you join the conversation. You see ways you can do so right there at the bottom of your screen. Josh?
So what is what is called a closely held business?
Yes.
Explain what that is, because I hear that term a lot.
Closely held corporation is simply usually one that a family or a small group form. There's no market for the shares of stock. It's not sold on any exchange, and there usually is restrictions on selling of your interest, and that's a closely held corporation.
Do they have certain corporate formalities they've got to follow in order to maintain that?
Just as you said earlier, yes, they still have to maintain the corporate formalities. Okay. But simply the closely held, there's no ready market for their sale. That affects value and things like that of the stock.
So we talked earlier about businesses, you said, could be issues when you've got two people that have a 50% ownership, or they try and have a 50% ownership in it. And I hear that. In most circumstances, someone's a minority shareholder versus a majority shareholder. Is that fair?
Yes.
All right. Tell me a little bit about the minority shareholder. Do they have rights? What kind of rights do they have? And what do you see from a litigation perspective most often in that area?
The biggest misconception I think that exists in Alabama. Minority shareholders, minority business interests, they do have rights, and Alabama does recognize that. As a general rule, you have a right to a reasonable expectation of profit. That doesn't mean every business venture makes profit. Right. They have to try. They have to reasonably do so. And Alabama law gives minority owners certain rights, for instance, to see books and records, financial things. And we mentioned earlier, daddy hiring mama or nephew and this, that, and other. You can't always do that when you have multiple shareholders, because minorities, they have a right to watch the bottom line. Yeah. And I see more small businesses get in trouble over hiring issues, family members, or buying from a company or a vendor that they own.
Kind of self-dealing.
Self-dealing, absolutely, absolutely. One of the worst I've seen was in North Alabama with a very, very large manufacturing firm and a very prominent family. But what that family did was set up 4, 5, 6, or 7 businesses that sold parts and supplies to the company at much higher prices. Well, guess who owned those small businesses? No. That family. Right. So the main company, which my clients had an interest in, was not very profitable. It broke even, and the salaries were very modest. Where the family made their money was on the other companies selling to them. Yeah.
So in that circumstance, minority shareholders have some rights.
They do. It's called a derivative action, where minority shareholders can sue the board of directors. Remember, the board of directors owe a duty to the shareholders. The executive officers owe a duty to the board. So they always have to keep that fiduciary obligation alive and foremost in their mind.
You made a great point earlier that I want to unwrap just a little bit, and you talked about the fact that minority shareholders have certain rights to look at the books, assess kind of what's happening with the business. That's a pretty important component. I mean, is Alabama unique in that respect?
No. Most every state gives rights to minority shareholders. Okay. Now, people hear a lot about Delaware law. And the reason is larger companies and mid-sized companies choose to incorporate in Delaware because Delaware has adopted a lot of defenses that tend to favor business. Now, that doesn't mean always. We're familiar with Delaware law because, again, a lot of corporations go by Delaware law. But even Alabama law, Tennessee law, Florida law, with a little bit of distinctions, they all give minority shareholders rights. Rights for accountability. I want to look at the books and records. Every state gives a minority that right, and that will tell you a lot.
And if a minority shareholder has got some of those rights, I'm sure part of the things you advise majority shareholders is, look, you can't push them out. You've got to comply with certain corporate formalities to give them information that they request to be able to kind of work within the confines of the business.
What I find most interesting is most corporate attorneys, they don't recognize minorities' rights at all. And they constantly develop ways that the majority that control the company can either ignore the minority or depress their rights. And it's really quite surprising to me because they end up in a courtroom. Yeah. And minorities can make demands on a majority. I hear you've employed Mother at $100,000 a year and she hadn't graduated high school. Why are you doing that? Right. Those types of things.
That's where guys like Tom come involved, right?
Yeah. You know, a lot of times I see folks who have a particular skill and talent that really is just exceptional. All right, yeah. So maybe they're a great salesperson, but they struggle with accounting, you know, that sort of thing. When you, just kind of anecdotally, your experience, do folks kind of get into trouble whenever they allow maybe what they are really good at to influence and really just kind of bury their head in the sand on the areas like accounting, like legal issues? A lot of times, just, you know, conversations with lawyers are intimidating. Is this kind of where some trouble they run into trouble here?
I think so. A lot of people are simply adverse to confrontation.
Right.
A lot of small companies, they know each other, they live in the same community, they go to the same church, their children go to the same school, so they don't want to get into fusses.
Right.
But everything isn't confrontation. Me simply asking, I want to see the books and records because I own stock.
Right.
I put money in way back when, so I have some rights too. You know, there's a good way to approach that. But yes, I think the more creative people are, the less inclined they are to dot I's and cross T's.
Right.
I think the more inclined they are to dot I's and cross T's, the less creative they are. But there's a use for that type of skill set as well.
Mm-hmm. I've always found, you know, running our business with the law firm, I've always found that the transparency concept is the most important. You don't lose partners when you're transparent, right? Partners want to be a part of your entity when you're transparent, when books are wide open, when people have access to it, they have rights, they know they have rights, and you're comfortable making sure they know they have rights. So a lot of times the transparency, I think, limits people leaving, so it creates continuity, and it limits litigation and potential problems down the road. I don't know if you see that, but
amen.
Yeah, there are not a lot of business owners probably that follow that rule, but it's a rule I learned from my dad down, and I think it's important. I mean, he ran a corporation, as we've talked about before, but you know, he did it in a way that was totally transparent, and he limited a lot of problems that he would have had otherwise. And I found with my partners, the way to maintain continuity is just to be upfront, honest, and it's all yours. That we're joint ventures.
You found that to be the case?
Well, don't think some of our clients are not law firms, which would not surprise you.
Yeah.
And I think if you expect young lawyers or younger people to come in your business, you want them to see that business. It's reality. Mm-hmm. Here we've had a good month, here not so good. Right. Here's what happens. Here's how you do that. Mm-hmm. The same's true with any company I've ever seen, whether it's a mom and pop or a larger one.
Yeah, I know we're going to break. We'll unwrap that just a little bit more when we get back, but I'll just say this to end that point and to underscore it. The importance there is your business owners need to understand the goods and the bads about your business so that they can understand why the paycheck may go down or why the paycheck goes up based on what's happening with the business. People aren't always profitable. That's just not the way it is. Sometimes they're not. And you want people to understand and walk that with you. No question.
All right. We're stepping aside. Great conversation tonight. Appreciate you being along as we step aside a way you can join our conversation. A few minutes remaining. And also, always, you can check out the firm of Hollis Wright online on the website. Also, social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Check them out there. Great informational, educational resource. Stay tuned. More of The Attorneys coming right up.
I'm attorney Carter Clay with Hollis Wright Law Firm. If you've ever been involved in a civil lawsuit or been a witness to an accident, then you may have been asked to give deposition testimony. In this week's Legal 411, we are answering the question, what is a deposition and why am I being asked to give one? Depositions involve the process of a person giving under oath testimony that is outside of court. The person giving deposition testimony is referred to as the deponent. Depositions are taken in the presence of a court reporter, and the court reporter records the testimony. After the deposition, the attorneys for the parties received a typed transcript that contains all the questions that were asked by the attorneys, as well as the answers given by the deponent. The purpose of taking depositions is to ensure that the attorneys for the parties have a full and complete understanding of the events giving rise to the lawsuit, as well as an understanding of the testimony that they can expect to hear from witnesses at trial. Another reason an attorney might want to get deposition testimony is that it allows the attorneys to better prepare for trial and to develop a strategy for presenting the case to a judge or a jury. At trial, the deposition testimony can be used in several ways. First, if a witness on the stand deviates from the deposition testimony, an attorney can use the deposition to impeach the witness. Also, if a witness forgets certain facts or events, the deposition can be used to refresh the witness's recollection. Finally, in some instances when a witness simply cannot attend trial, the trial judge has the authority to allow the deposition testimony to be read to the jury. If you are a party to a lawsuit and are requested to give deposition testimony, your attorney will likely spend a significant amount of time preparing you for the deposition process to put you at ease and make you feel comfortable. Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis Wright want to help answer your questions on real issues you face. Remember, a competent lawyer will respond to every question you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you. Thanks for watching The Attorneys on WBTM 13.
Welcome back into The Attorneys. Just a few minutes remaining, and a few minutes remaining for you to speak with an attorney who's standing by live from Hollis Wright. Again, that confidential conversation take place off the air. Pick up the phone and give them a call. We've got about 5-6 minutes remaining, but want to get into the topic of arbitrating and arbitration, especially whenever there is a deadlock. You were talking about 50-50 or however the company, the pie is divided. Talk to us for a little bit about arbitration and the value there.
Well, I don't know that there's much value to arbitration. That's my personal opinion. A lot of LLCs and operating agreements provide for arbitration. And that, as you know, is simply a process where you lose the right to a jury trial, you lose access to the courthouse, you lose access to discovery, most discovery, and you are forced into a process which I think is very expensive. It can take a lot of time. You get limited resources to prosecute your claim. I'm not a fan, but it is real. Now, the parties, if the agreement doesn't provide, can arbitrate any way they want. I have seen parties where one side chooses an arbitrator, the other one chooses an arbitrator, then those two arbitrators will pick a neutral. Again, it's a pretty expensive process, but you can do that.
Yeah, and you know, that kind of goes into, we've done some shows on alternative dispute resolution processes, and you know, one is going to a jury trial, right, where you've got jurors that get to decide the fate, and then there are private judges, there are arbitrations. A lot of that is based on the contract and the relationship you have that you've built with your contracts and whatnot, and a lot of it comes out of that. And if there's litigation, sometimes there's more efficient ways to resolve it than arbitration. Sometimes people just mediate, and so they go and sit between two different, a mediator that tries to resolve a dispute between parties, but he's kind of a neutral. Sometimes that works too. So there are a lot of different ways that you can resolve disputes. But I'll tell you this, the most important thing is if you find yourself in the potential business dispute circumstance, you want to call a guy like Tom. You don't want to try and handle this alone and interpret your own contract. Getting a lawyer involved is a good idea. And as Tom mentioned and corrected me early on, he does a lot of his cases based on contingency fee arrangements where, remember what a contingency fee is, super important for people to understand that. You don't pay anything unless there's success in the case. And you may not have to fund the expenses. They may be funded by a third party, and then you get reimbursed. And then there are agreements where maybe you do fund some of the expenses. So you just got to work with a lawyer and ask those questions. But the worst thing that a person can do if they're in a business dispute is sit on the couch right now and say, it's going to solve itself. Yeah. The reality is go talk to somebody, and you're probably going to get some free advice initially. And sometimes that advice, I know Tom will tell you, is, hey, you don't need to go there yet. We're not at the litigation stage. Here are 2 or 3 things you can do to fix your circumstance. Yeah. But coming to a guy like Tom, especially when it's a non-intimidating environment and you can ask questions, that's the way to do it.
Yeah,
100%.
Problems rarely just go away and solve themselves, do they?
No, they don't. They tend to get worse. And in commercial law, the last thing you generally do is file a lawsuit first. You generally need more information, and that's what brought the minority business person to you. And the biggest thing they don't want to give up is the books. You can look at a financial statement, it doesn't really tell you a lot. You want to go back behind that.
Right.
99% of the time, that's the problem. You can't get the financial information. Transparency, as you said earlier.
100%. How long have you been practicing?
40-something years.
Goodness.
Still learning every day.
Guy knows a lot.
He does.
Still learning.
He's there. I love it.
Still learning every day.
I love it.
Time has flown. Less than 2 minutes remaining, but want to get a final thought from both of you. And Tom, if you would, you go first, please, sir.
I think the best thing anyone can do for themselves is consult a lawyer and a good accountant. It's the cheapest advice, and it will save you so much down the road. Yeah. So much down the road.
If you find yourself in the circumstance where you're a minority shareholder and you feel like you're being taken advantage of, if you've got a legitimate business dispute, sometimes it's best to go to counsel early, gather the information, and maybe you can avoid litigation because of it. Sometimes you can avoid litigation when you find yourself in that spot, but also if you're thinking about setting a business up, talk to guys like Tom to be able to know how to set your business up so that you can hopefully avoid some of these conflicts down the road. That's super important.
Yeah, I think that's the value of having counsel, seeing things that you don't see, whenever you want to hire mama. Well, Mama's not always the best choice.
If you don't stand up for yourself, no one else will.
Well, that's right. Hey, thank you for coming
on.
Josh,
thank you.
Thank you and your firm for being part of it. I really
enjoyed it.
Really appreciate it. First time you've been on, you did a great job. You're good.
Well,
he may start guest hosting this stuff.
That's right. Let's do it. Let's do it. Hey, thanks for both of you being with us. Also, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Always our pleasure to be a part of your Sunday evening. As we wrap things up, here's how you can get in touch with Hollis Wright, the firm. They'd love to hear from you, and also you can find them on social media as well. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time right here on The Attorneys.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.